central and northern mainland coast of British Columbia could not be a more difficult place to launch a conservation campaign. A campaign to bring recognition and reverence to one of the Earth's last great temperate rainforest strongholds. Remoteness and inaccessibility have hidden wild places of ecological significance, scattered along thousands of kilometers of shoreline in a region dominated by ragged outcroppings of the Coast Range and a bewildering number of fjords and passages. Roughly 600 kilometers long and 150 kilometers wide, hardly any place on the RAINCOAST can be reached by road. A few isolated native villages and 3 ports punctuate a largely uninhabited coast. Periodically lashed with an enormous amount of rain, while snow blankets higher elevations for a good part of the year, the RAINCOAST can be awfully inhospitable at times. The vital core, the center of biological diversity of this rainforest coast, is largely found in the wild river valleys. Down from 1,000 highland lakes and bursting out of the glaciers and ice fields, rivers flow out to the inlets and passages through an increasing intensity of rainforest life. River corridors are often little more than lonely green fingers penetrating through cracks in the great escarpment of the Coast Range. Each one of these wild coastal rivers is a masterpiece of nature. Their estuaries are nurseries of the sea. Their rivers produce one of the great miracles of life, salmon. 5 species, as well as a genetic profusion of races, an extraordinary biomass of pinks, chums, chinook, coho, sockeye, and the most revered of all, the steelhead. To this annual celebration come packs of wolves and some of the highest concentrations of grizzlies left on Earth. And above all, the nurturing, binding, ancient forest. Those towering, majestic conifers, the spruce, cedar, and hemlock. Where are all the pristine river valleys, the precious lowland ancient forests? What has become of the wild salmon in the 800 or 900 rivers on the RAINCOAST? How are the grizzlies faring? How many of these priceless gifts of nature have been destroyed by clear-cut logging, and how soon will the rest be gone? A few years ago, no one seemed to know very much, and few cared. It was out of sight and out of mind. Biodiversity assessments and conservation options had no place in federal or provincial government planning. Only one thing took priority, and still does today: issuing free timber licenses for the liquidation of almost all of the ecologically productive rainforests on the coast of British Columbia. As long as the outside world is kept in the dark, and the government public relations and a flood of political promises obscure the evidence, the timber companies can quietly proceed with the stripping of ancient forests in one valley after another. Alarmed by the clear-cutting that has laid waste to most of the rich ancient forests on Vancouver Island, and the government's stubborn intention of proceeding with even more deforestation on the island, we sailed north 5 years ago and have every year since, in search of the last great mainland coastal rainforests, before they also vanish. It has been the beginning of an enormous undertaking, and a lonely one, because these rainforest treasures have few friends. Sometimes we find ourselves literally chronicling and documenting the final days of a coastal valley, a wild place that ought to be revered as priceless natural heritage. In our travels, we have met with some of the people of the First Nations, and with their help have discovered the prolific evidence of human tradition and culture dating back 10,000 years. Most of the natives are saddened by the clear-cutting that is killing their rivers and devastating their ancestral lands. But they are powerless to stop the multinationals. From each RAINCOAST expedition, we have brought back images and stories that are beginning to capture the attention of the outside world. The salvation of this unrivaled reservoir of temperate rainforest diversity may well depend upon the passion and concern of people who are unlikely to ever see these extraordinary places. If only they could see what we have been privileged to see. If only they could shed the tears we have shed. Then there would be no question of how many more valleys must be sacrificed for pulp and for the subsidized profits of the timber companies.